On February 15, 1942, Lieutenant General A.E. Percival and his fellow officers surrendered Singapore to the Imperial Japanese Army. Landing in northern Malaya, Japanese troops swept through it in just weeks. The British were well aware of Japanese intentions in the months leading up to the invasion of Malaya, but in just a matter of weeks, the seemingly mighty Allied forces were pushed back by a smaller force. The fall of Singapore was not, as some think, because only of the lack of military defences. Mistakes, indecision and infighting weakened the Allies, and their efforts were not supported by the pillars we know today as total defence. Could this have, in some way, contributed to the eventual fall of Singapore? At the start of 1941, it was business as usual in Singapore. There was an air of confidence. The island had a massive naval yard and huge anti-ship guns had been built at the south and west of the island to deter coastal attacks. But the illusion of security was shattered in the wee hours of December 8. When the Japanese invaded Malaya, they also launched an air raid on Singapore. Reports vary, but between 60 and 200 were said to be killed, and scores more were injured as bombs hit Chinatown, Battery Road, Killiney Road and Raffles Place, as well as various airfields. A lack of training prevented the Allies' planes from taking to the air to defend Singapore. There were also few or no air raid measures and shelters for the majority of the people. The civilians on the island were simply caught off guard both mentally and physically for the conflict, as the colonial authorities had not been active in mobilizing them. As the British had tried to keep the idea of business as usual going on for as long as possible, there was very little urgency in developing serious plans to protect the population. By January 31st, 1942, the Allies had retreated from Malaya into Singapore, and parts of the causeway were blown up to slow down the Japanese. Extra effort was then put into building defensive positions in the north. Even though there had been more than a month to properly build better defences, those early efforts were hampered by a lack of labour, as the British Army was not allowed to pay an adequate wage to attract local labourers to such a risky task. Also, some of those in charge had believed that such an undertaking was bad for morale, so they did not pursue it. The Japanese attacked the western part of the island, which was lightly defended as the Allies did not expect them to come from that direction. The Allies had spread its forces all over the island instead. During the invasion of Singapore, the majority of the island's population were bystanders in the fight. Yet many of them were the ones who suffered the most during the occupation. More locals could have been mobilized and trained for the defense, but were not. The colonial administration also seemed wary of arming the locals. But recruiting them would have been a positive step, as they would have been fighting for the very survival of their homeland. For instance, in the Battle of Bukit Chandu on February 13 and 14, the Malay regiment fought valiantly, although outnumbered by Japanese forces. Eventually, they were wiped out after running out of ammunition and engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat.